Hi, my name is Valerie, and today I'm going to talk to you about how I made curtains for my husband. So, first of all, curtains for my husband, but he's a guy. Why does he need curtains? So he has this little bookshelf, and the bookshelf is full of computer stuff, and some of that computer stuff has blinky lights. Well, he also has this one friend that likes to stay over at our house sometimes because they work together. And so my husband is worried that these blinky lights are going to keep his friend up at night. And secretly, I think he wants to sleep in there too, and lights kind of bother him. So I had to measure out how big this space was that I'm covering up. So I ended up measuring the height and the width and then adding about 2 inches to kind of just account for the fact that you're going to be making a seam, and then I also folded it in, kind of like a pillowcase idea. So because of that, it ended up taking, almost an inch of fabric. So measuring it, I came up with about 20 inches in height and 24 inches in width. And then when I went to the store with him, I took him with me to join fabric so he could pick out the fabric himself. We found this really nice fabric. It's kind of thick. It was in the sweater aisle of Joann Fabrics, and it kind of makes me think of the outside of like a nice suit jacket or a sport jacket. And we tested it because there's a flashlight part on my husband's phone, and that cut down on the amount of light pretty well. So when we went up to the counter to get this cut, we found out that there actually was the end of a bolt that had been wound down to the bolt that we had picked out. So the lady gave it to us, that whole yard, for about half the price. And that was really nice of her. So thank you, lady at the Joann Fabric store. So I brought the fabric home. I kind of held it up to the space that I was going to measure it for, and width-wise, it actually worked pretty nicely, but lengthwise, I ended up having to cut off about 18 inches of fabric, which is what we have left over here. So I cut it up the middle to make 2 separate panels, and then I pinned it. And then I just kind of held it up so that I could see the length. The length still worked. And then I used my sewing machine in order to go all the way around, except for a little hole at the end so that I could turn it inside out like a pillowcase. And then I used a far corner in the first panel to try and turn it inside out because the hole was bigger. Then on the second panel, I tried using a near corner because it was a smaller hole, and either way, it was difficult because it's a lot of fabric for a small hole. And then I used a needle and thread to sew that hole closed on both panels. And then I just kind of ran the needle through the fabric to hide that tail, and then I held it up again just to make sure the length would still work, and it did. Then I ironed it, and I put it on my sewing machine again just to kind of reinforce that stitching, and also it kind of just gave it a professional designer looking edge. And then I folded down the unsewn side, and I stitched across that in order to make the sleeve so that the curtain rod could go on it. And I folded it about 1.5 inches, and it ended up looking pretty good, I think. It just barely fit over the end of the curtain rod because it flares out. And the curtains just looked really nice. And because the curtain rod held it away, there was enough space for heat ventilation, and then the length of it turned out pretty good as well. So I hope that this inspires you to do your own sewing project on the sewing machine, whether you're a beginner or you know how to do it already. I think that this is a really good beginner project because it has a lot of simple, straight sewing lines, and you can make something useful out of it. So have a nice rest of your day, and happy sewing.